Hi
Hello, good
guys.
evening. Welcome to Theater
Good
Mix, where we
evening.
talk about theater, performing arts, racket life, and everything in between. I am your host for this evening. I am Marlon, and tonight we will be talking about the past and present and future of Philippine theater. And with me tonight is my co-host, Lia. Hello, can you introduce yourself,
Hi
Lia?
guys. Hi, I'm Leah. I'm the secretary of Artemix. So hi, I'm so excited for this podcast right now, mostly with our guest speaker. So yeah, let's go on.
Speaking of our guest speaker tonight, Lia, would you do the honors to introduce our guest for this episode of Theater Mix?
Of course. So our guest speaker is an award-winning theater, film, and TV director, writer, actor, and producer who has held key positions in cultural organizations and government agencies, including Associate Artistic Director and Artistic Vice President of the Cultural Center of the Philippines, Artistic Director of Tanghalan Filipino, President of Philstage, and Executive Director of the Movie and TV Review and Classification Board. At present, he is the Theater Arts Program Head of Meridian International Men's College. I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Sir Dennis Marasigan. Hi, Sir Dennis.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Nakaka-overwhelm naman yung speaker. Tinawag na
Welcome
speaker.
po,
Thank you. I'm
sir.
very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So, just to get the ball rolling about the past, present, and future of theater, sir, we want to ask like, how did your theater journey start?
Ganun yung past eh. No? When- way,
Your
way,
past.
way in the past. Actually, it started, my theater journey actually, I think basically started when I was still in high school. There was a group of us students who were trained to do radio drama. And then so we were actually trained to act for radio, and then we were doing radio productions that was actually aired over a station in Batangas and also in my hometown in Lipa City. And then when I was in my fourth year in high school, there was a school in Lipa that was an all-girls school, and they invited the male students from the two other schools to join them. And so that was my first formal foray into theater as an actor, with paid tickets to boot, people watching you. And maybe it was that experience that that propelled me to audition for theater company, a theater production, on just my third day in college. No, and that production turned out to be a play that was directed by Tony Mabesa, and I haven't looked back ever since. Tony Mabesa, the late Tony Mabesa, became my mentor, and he guided me through theater, and then in a way, he also became my wedding sponsor and all that. So he was really a kind of mentor to me, and it probably is providential that even though I took on management roles or administrative roles, it was always related to theater or allied arts, including television and film. So in capsule, that's how it started.
So you mentioned Mr. Mabesa. Do you have any other mentors who inspired you to continue on theater and learning
I
more about
was
theater past present?
I was very lucky that at that time, such directors as the late Ben Cervantes, Anton Juan, Jonas Sebastian were teachers in UP, and they were directing in UP. So they were my first mentors and directors and teachers. No? At the same time, I also got to work with other directors because I started working with other theater companies. So I got to work with all the theater companies at the time, including Teatro Filipino and PETA. I worked with Rolando Tino. I got to work with Buluwagang Gantimpala under Tony Espejo. I got to work with Repertory Philippines with Senaida Amador. So name it, I probably have had worked with them in the long the many number of years that I have been in theater. So and I was lucky that many of them are aside from directors, are actually teachers, and even if they were not intending to, there was a lot that I learned from them. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sir. So just to kind of go into the theme of this podcast, in your opinion, sir, what's your favorite past theater form? Something from the Philippines, something maybe from Greek, the Greek part of theater. Do you have like a favorite part of it? Part theater part? Sorry.
It's not necessarily favorite, but if you ask me about like moment of theater, or moments in theater that I remember, I would say that the probably the greatest thrill I've ever had so far in my life was probably watching a production of Chekhov's Cherry Orchard from the front row at the Moscow Art Theater. And it was a thrill because my thesis had been to direct and to design the lighting for Chekhov, and so that was like a big thrill for me. And so I have a bias for Chekhov and Chekhovian drama, and by extension, realistic drama. Yeah.
So actually, can I ask, like, how did you get into that? Like, where did that part of your thesis come about? Like, where did it come from?
Probably, by the time I did my thesis, I had been working in the theater for like 7 years. I mean, it took me longer to graduate than most students. And you might say I had experience acting in Chekhov. I was cast in a production of Cherry Orchard, also by Tony Mabesa. So I got introduced to Chekhov, and I liked his style of writing, and so I submitted Seagull by Chekhov as my thesis project, and it was approved. And so I ended up doing Seagull. And over the span of my theater career, I've been privileged to have worked in his four major plays. I've directed two, and I have acted in two. So I would say that my grounding in Chekhov is pretty intense, you might say.
Okay, so that's actually really interesting. Check out. Um, because sir,
Some
my
people even say that
thesis.
some of the plays I wrote are Chekhovian.
Well, sir, I mean, if that was like a big part, mostly that it's your thesis, so it will over carry over in
Overflow,
your
carry
next,
over.
yeah, yeah, carry
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Um, sir, so we're going into productions now, and I was wondering, since we are talking about the past, present, and future, and right now the present is online productions. Do you have any favorite productions or work that have been done online already?
I remember asking the late Tony Mabesa also, what's your favorite production? And he always said, the last one. Because he says that he after he finishes one production, he moves on to the next one, and so the last one that he did would always be his favorite because that's the last one that he had just did. No? And then, uh, but then again, it's also like asking a parent, "Who's your favorite child?" And so it's very difficult to choose a particular favorite. Let me just say that probably. Every production up to now for me is a learning opportunity, and everything that I learn in the production gets carried over to the next production. And so in a way, there is some truth to my saying that my favorite production would be my last one, because probably that was the last one where I was able to employ the things that I have also learned, and in particular, if you're talking about the pandemic, things that I've learned over the last 2 years in terms of working in productions that are intended for online streaming.
So you mentioned about all the things that you learned with through this online platform already. Do you have any specific or major challenges that you faced in this online medium? Like something that really stuck in your head afterwards.
I think that my attitude had always been that when we started to migrate into this medium, this online platform, out of necessity, mind you, I was conscious that this was different than a face-to-face theater experience where the audience and the performers are in the same place. At the same time, it might have helped that I have, I would say, extensive film and television experience. So I am used to working in a medium where there is a, you might call mediated, in the sense that the audience does not experience the performance live, but it comes to them through the mediation of editors and directors and what have you. And so I looked at the performance online as a cross between live theater performance and a film performance or television performance. And therefore, when I started directing productions for this particular platform, I was conscious that there are elements that I can get from live performance that I can combine with elements and principles of film to be able to communicate. And one of the other things that I also chanced upon was there are actually principles also from, say, oral interpretation that I was able to inject into live performances that seem to work. So this kind of performance that we've had for the last couple of years has also been like finding the right aesthetics or the appropriate aesthetics for what I would consider as a new and different medium altogether.
Sir, since you mentioned that out of necessity, we did do unconventional ways to deliver our theater performances. We still do live performances, albeit it being in a digital platform. But there have been some organizations, companies that have done it in a different way. They did it in a pre-recorded way. They did it remotely using actors' own cameras, their own equipment, and then they would then edit it eventually. Now, can we still call this a theatrical production, even though that it isn't live, that it has been edited out? Since in the traditional sense, theater production is having that sense of liveness.
I would say no. I mean, I think the basic elements of a theater performance is that you have an idea that's being communicated by performers to an audience in a particular space. So the element of being in the same space is what defines theater. I've always also believed that, and this is something that I picked up from my teachers, is that if you do a performance live but there's no audience, that's not even theater. That's just a rehearsal. No? So it's the presence of the audience that actually makes for a theater performance, and that audience has to be in the same space as the performers. So the fact alone that the audience is not in the same space as the performers, I wouldn't call it theater. I would say this is an online performance or an online production. And that's why I said that that being the case, then we cannot say that a strictly theater performance will translate into film. Anywhere in the world, the moment that you film a performance, even if it is a live performance, that's no longer considered as a theater performance. It's considered as film or television. And in the last couple of years, we have several productions that have been filmed, and they're considered for, say, awards as a film performance rather than as a theater performance. There have been groups even before the pandemic elsewhere in the world that have been regularly providing live performances that are being streamed to audiences, but they say it in that particular manner, that this is live theater, and it is still live theater because there are audiences that are present during the live performance, but it is also being streamed to people who are watching it in cinemas or in theaters or in television stations. So I think that in a way, looking at the experience that had been there before the pandemic also sort of prepared me in terms of how to approach this online performance, but I wouldn't call it theater in strict terms.
So it's more of an online performance rather than theater.
Yeah, an online production or a
How
streaming
about,
production.
sir,
Yeah.
if yes, even, sir, those performances that are like they are being streamed live with an audience in the same room as the actors, it's still not considered as a theatrical production.
Well, that's a theatrical production by the mere fact that there's
Okay.
an audience that's present, right? But to us watching it from an online platform, you cannot say that it's a theater performance for us. It's actually the streaming of a theater production or a theater performance. That's kind of where the nuances are coming in. But something that, as you described, which we actually did in Mint, no, we actually did at least one production or even several productions where we pre-taped the actors and then we edited their performances together. uh, that was I would consider it as really more filmic rather than considering it as strictly theater performance. In that sense, that there's a live audience, of course, it is a theater performance, and then it is streamed to another audience. But those who are watching it are actually watching a theater performance in the strict sense of the word.
Sir. Sir, we already talked about the past, the present. We'll go in a bit deeper. No, I would just like to ask your opinion regarding what do you think is the most important concept or application from the past that could have shaped theater as it is now in this setting that we are in right now?
I think the fact that theater is able to adapt to different circumstances. So, for example, if you look at the whole history of theater, theater has always been shaped by the environment and the circumstances that existed. So, in the case of the Greek theater was predominantly a function of the Dionysian festivals, and they were done for the community, which is basically a homogeneous community, meaning that everybody knew what the plays were because the plays were all about the gods that everybody knew. And when people came into the performances, it was not a matter of finding out what the story was because they all knew the stories, but how well the performances were actually going to be delivered. And it was a competition as we as history has taught us that in Greek theater survived largely because it was a competitive nature of things at the time, that you have to come up with a play that will be better than the others, and that was how Greek theater developed. When the Romans became the predominant civilization, they, in a sense, copied the examples that they found in the Greek civilizations without the Dionysian element. And then in the medieval period, when theater was outlawed basically because it was something that was uh, against the morals of the then predominant Christian church. Ironically, theater again recovered because of the church, that when they started doing mystery plays and inside the church, or plays that had to do with biblical events, it became very successful that people went to church to watch the performances, and so they had to take the theater out of the church onto the churchyard and onto carriages, and then later in the Renaissance, when there was a kind of a reevaluation and a rediscovery of the classics, particularly the Romans, then the Italians built theaters in the tradition of the Roman theaters, but instead of building them on hillsides, they actually built them inside even bigger buildings. And so if you go on and on and on, theater has adapted depending on the situation, and that's the reason why theater has survived for over 2,000 years. When film came about, a lot of theater artists went to do film, and they said the theater was going to die. It didn't. When television came about, they also said that the theater was going to die, and it didn't. And the fact that in spite of the Spanish flu 100 years ago, I think that the experience tells us that this pandemic that we've had this year, this last couple of years, is not going to kill theater. In fact, we already have movements in theater, not just in the other countries, but also in the Philippines. There are theater productions now coming back on stage, and there are theater productions that are now being planned even as we speak. I just got the Virgin Lab Fest is going to be back on a face-to-face basis this year after 2 years that it has been online. And there are already some groups that are rehearsing that. And I saw the audition posters for Mula sa Buwan. So there are groups that are already planning to have live theater in this country. And I think that just reinforces my answer that theater is going to survive because it is adapting, and it will continue to adapt depending on the situation and circumstances, just as what we are doing right now.
Yes, sir. Sir, we talked about more on the practical aspect of what's happening right now. As an educator, sir, what do you think, or how do you think this will affect teaching theater to students in the future, or as right now, as it is happening in this pandemic era?
I've actually been very glad that I've been teaching in Mint for the last 8 years. But even before that, I have been teaching off and on for the last 30 years, and I am actually happy and excited by the fact that there are more theater students than there were before, and even during the pandemic. There was a loss in terms of enrollment, but not because they don't like theater, but because they wanted to that students or even parents wanted to take a sem off or a year off because of the pandemic conditions and not because of the fear of theater. So even during the pandemic, we still continue to take in students for theater, and it has been exciting for the students, and I'm glad that even those students who entered our program in the last couple of years were saying that their experience was actually more than they expected, that they think that they learned a lot during the last 2 years, and they're even more excited to experience having theater again in with face to face with an audience, or face to face with other actors.
So, moving forward, sir, what do you think could be the future of theater as it has adapted right now? What do you think would happen in the future? How would it be presented?
I think that what has happened during the last couple of years is, in fact, it has given a lot of theater makers, writers, directors, producers, a a different avenue or a different possibilities that are there. Before the pandemic, you probably you will have producers or directors primarily or singularly focused on the live performance of their productions. And in the course of the pandemic, we realized that you can expand the audience for these productions by going online, by streaming the performances, which in fact had been happening and had been done by other groups elsewhere. I mean, one of the leading groups in that area would be the National Theatre of Great Britain, that had been streaming empty live productions, and also the Metropolitan Opera, that they have been streaming productions live throughout the whole world. And one of the best examples that happened was that when uh, um, when the production of musicals were performed online and streamed online, in you would have probably a maximum of what, 3,000 audience members in the biggest venue that we had. How many people watched a particular musical during the time? It went into millions, no? And so there's the possibility of even reaching audiences. And for that matter, I mean, I go back to my childhood, that the first time I experienced a musical was through its film adaptation. So I, like, I became familiar with the with let's say Sound of Music or Camelot or Cabaret, because of the film adaptations of these musicals, which made me want to see the stage production. So I think that's a possibility that exists, so that the experience that we've had during the last couple of years will serve as a way of being able to reach an audience that otherwise we wouldn't have reached, like, geographical. I mean, the people who watch these productions are not limited to the area around the theaters, but we also got people all over the world who are able to do this, to watch these productions.
Thank you, sir. Leah, do you have anything
Sorry,
else?
and I might add.
Oh,
Sorry, Marlon,
yes, sir.
and I forgot.
Go on, sir.
And also in terms of the staging possibilities, now that we know that possibility of streaming, then when producers and production companies plan for their productions, they can include the elements that will work well also for streaming, so that they can include it in the budgets. Previously, even the even productions, there were certain productions that were streamed, and not only in the Philippines, that there were productions that were streamed that were simply captured by regular cameras for documentation, and they were not even for
Mhm.
broadcast quality, right? But now that we know that these are possibilities, uh, and look what happened to a couple of productions in the last couple of years. They just filmed the performance that was happening on stage, and I'm talking of like Hamilton and Come From Away, and they managed to be able to come up with very good film versions or film productions of the stage presentations, and so it does expand the the kind of audience that you have for these productions, and the
I
way
was
that you're going to stage them. Yeah.
I was actually about to ask you that, sir, regarding because pre-pandemic, people did do illegal recordings of shows, and this was frowned upon by producers, by the
Right.
theater
Right.
community. But I think post-pandemic, I think this view would be changed, and I really like that thought that what you said earlier. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Leah,
the
do you have
fact that
anything else to add?
actually, if I can just add, the fact that the audience is growing because of this new form, I think that's one of the good takeaways we can get from this. Actually,
Yeah.
I have a question, sir, about the current situation of Philippine theater right now. Between the Philippine theater groups around here, do you think because of this pandemic, our bonds together or the bonds within the theater group itself or with other theater groups have been stronger or got stronger because of what's been happening?
It was getting stronger even before the pandemic, and I think that the fact that we all shared this experience is only going to make it even the bonds even closer, and the fact that we now realize that distance is not something that that we cannot overcome, no. During the pandemic, for example, there was already moves to like bring together educators from all the schools that were teaching theater or have theater programs all over the country, and the logical outcome of that would be to come up with projects that will bring students together from different universities, from different islands of the country. At first, probably online, but later on, this will be opportunities for theater students to come together, and this will be the same students who will form part of the theater profession or the theater industry. And um, I'd like to ask you and our viewers, uh, who are your closest friends? These are the people that you meet when you were still students and you were doing productions together. And in much the same way that something that you did together binds you, then the fact that we all went through this pandemic together, I suppose is even going to bind us even closer to each other.
That is very true for Leah and me. We met in college theater, and until now we're still pursuing that
Right,
path.
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah.
uh, Anything else, Leah, that you would like to add, or nothing else? Okay.
Actually, if we're are, uh, if it's okay, so do you have any like words to the theater community who's the theater people who like are a bit shy right now because theater is supposed to be just live. I might not want to join this specific thing right now because I'm waiting for it to be live. Like, do you have anything to tell those people about it?
Well, actually, everybody will just come in and jump in whenever they're ready, and so I think there's no problem, or there's nothing wrong with how you feel about it. I mean, it's better that everybody or anybody who would like to come back to theater or join theater for the first time does so because they're able and ready. An attitude is a very important aspect of the work that we do, and sometimes defines the kind of person and the kind of worker that you are. So uh, rather than force people to try to just jump in because they feel that they need to, instead of when they want to, I think that shouldn't be a problem at all as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Sir, before we end the show, do you have any takeaway, any message, or that our audience can take away from this episode that we have tonight?
I think that it has guided me over the years, and probably is something that I subscribe to, that every opportunity is a learning opportunity. And the last couple of years are wonderful learning opportunities for all of us, because what happened was that when we all felt, particularly those of us who had been in the business longer, that when we felt that theater was actually getting bigger and getting stronger, and we're getting more audiences with us, then suddenly everything just stopped, and it was something that we were not prepared for. I remember that with the news that there was going to be a lockdown and everything would stop, I had taken my students to a preview of a performance, and suddenly the following day everything just stopped. And but instead of saying, okay, it stopped, do we all stop? And I think my attitude had been that let's try to learn from the experience. What can we take away from all of this? And that's something that can help us move forward in the future, when we're able to do things in a way that we're more used to. But I also have to say that we're never going to go back to the normal life that we had before the pandemic, because all of these things that have been done during the last 2 years have also taught us something, and we should not just throw them away. We should be able to use them in order to be able to like to be able to reach a bigger audience, because that's all we want. Is we want to reach a bigger audience because we want to communicate to them, we want to entertain them, we want them to join us, and let them see how enjoyable it is to be in the theater. One of the sad things is that a lot of people in the Philippines believe they don't know theater, but the fact is they have experienced theater. It's just that they don't realize that it is still theater. I have this usual question that I ask students. So, what kind of theater experience have you had? And I said, I haven't watched any theater. Yeah. Okay. In your locality, don't you have these parades? Don't you have these processions? And then I would explain to them why that is also theater. Then they realize, oh, okay, so I experienced theater. I said, didn't you go to your plazas to watch this kind of performance where you show the life of Jesus Christ, or a simple case where you had people improvising on stage? That's also theater. And so then you realize that then they realize that they've actually experienced theater. It's just that they have been conditioned that theater is something that is alien to them, rather than something that is actually inherent in our culture. And so what I hope to happen is that in the future, that we are all able to join hands, those who are in the theater, to join hands in being able to expand the appreciation and knowledge of the theater. One of the things that I had gotten into uh, arguments about and conflict about was that some people are questioning, where is the audience for theater? And I said, they're around. It's just that you're probably not communicating with them in the proper way. They probably don't realize that they're the audience for theater, because you're talking to them in a different language, or you're not we are not doing a better job at educating them in terms of what constitutes theater, or what is theater. Maybe we have, and I would admit that there are those of us, and I probably was one of them at a certain point, who was looking at theater only from the professional theater aspect. But that's not, if you look at again, as theater as a history, the guilds of the medieval ages, they were not doing it as a profession. They were doing it because it was something that was their contribution to the community. So uh, saying the theater is not popular in this country probably means that you're only talking about the professional theater. It's always something that those who are working in educational theater or community theater outside of the metropolitan areas, or outside of Manila for that matter, are saying, theater is not limited to Manila. It's happening everywhere. You know.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your experiences, your journey, your thoughts and opinions regarding the past, present, and future of theater. Do you have anything to promote, sir? If if you do, you can promote it right now.
All right. I'll take you up on that. Um, uh, and in a way, it might somehow relate to what we're talking about, the present and the future of Philippine theater. It's that right now we're working on a new performance of Lia Bukoy's Doc Resurrection Gagamutin ng Bayan, which will be done as a production for streaming. So this is with Tanghalang Pilipino. The production, Doc Resurrection Gagamutin ng Bayan, will begin streaming on Resurrection Sunday, on Easter Sunday. That's April 17. It will be streaming for 2 weeks. Um, uh, it will feature the actors of Tanghalang Filipino, the actors company of Tanghalang Filipino. At the same time, I'm also going to be directing a play for Virgin Lab Fest. Virgin Lab Fest 17 is going to be from June 15 to 26 at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. It will go back to its original home, the Tanghalang Hoseng Baptute. There will be limited audiences for the performances, and then afterwards, after the first 2 weeks that it will be performed live, then it will also be streamed. So that's I think that's already an example of what I have been saying, that we can combine these two things, that what we've been doing before and what we have learned to do during the last couple of weeks. And then at the same time, I'd like to give a plug for Mint Theater Arts Program. So if you're interested in doing theater, and by the way, the Theater Arts Program is not only for students who want to do a bachelor's degree program. We are also making available and offering programs for even those who just want to take up theater. So there are some courses that we're able to open up for professionals who want to like study playwriting or just want to take up acting. So these are programs that are also available. And mind you, Mint College is not the only one that's offering that. There are other schools that are doing that, and other theater organizations that are also doing the same thing. So thank you very much for that.
Again, sir, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we go,
Thank you,
can
sir.
I just invite everyone to follow us on our social media pages, like us here on Facebook. You can also find us on YouTube, our Tremix Productions, on Instagram at our Tremix Productions, and on Twitter at our Tremix PH. And for more information about our small group, our small collective, you can visit our website at www.ourtremixproductions.com. So thank you once again, sir, for joining us for this episode of Theater
Thank you,
Mix.
sir.
We learned a lot, sir. Super fruitful yung ating discussion tonight. I hope
Thank
you
you,
had a
thank
good
you
time
for
din po, sir.
thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this chance to be with you and with your audience. And uh, I'd like to say that theater will be back.
It will.
Yes, it
Thank you,
will.
sir.
It's coming. It's already here at the mouth.
Yes, it's beginning to come back. Anyway, thank you guys
Yes.
for joining us this evening.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you
guys.
soon here on Theater Mix. This has been Marlon and my co-host.
And Leah. Leah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.